Alright, let's go on to the 7th movie in the series with VHS Beyond. And so when 99 promised us we were going to hell and then 85 promised us the 80s, this one prepares us for space and aliens. So let's just get right into that. The first segment, called Stork, is by Jordan Downey, and it starts us with this task force that's looking for these missing babies. And it seems like it's kind of got this sort of raid set up, and we're not quite sure what we're going to be seeing when we go into it, especially with the whole space and alien setup, or just any sort of monster vibe, but we're far enough into the VHS franchise now that we know it's going to be something that's probably insane. I love the detail of when we're at like their headquarters and you can see the tape on the shelf that's labeled Ratman, which I'm assuming is a callback to 94 with the storm drain sequence. I can't remember if there's anything else on that shelf, but that one kind of stands out, and it also kind of, once again, if you're a fan of the franchise, kind of sets you up for what you're in for going into this. And you can already sense the tongue-in-cheek nature with the fact that there's actually a character in the task force named E.T. It's like, at that point, it's like, you could say it's on the nose, but I feel like at this point it's just kind of tongue-in-cheek to show that they're just having fun at this point. So, which is what a lot of this entire movie feels like. So they go out to this very creepy-looking house, and we immediately see people walking around, and it's eventually it's like a zombie vibe for a while. And there's some actually well-shot, frenetic action. There's like this point of view from a particular character that's always panicking, so it kind of gives you that vibe of being like right there in it. And it's actually surprisingly a nice, like, controlled chaos. Like, there's not too much shaky cam, and we get stuff like the point of view chainsaw and stuff like that. And different things we're seeing around and different clues, like the sculpture of the stork that's like made out of sticks and it's surrounded by candles, and just that just gives off this really creepy and off vibe, almost like a culty vibe in a way. And they're all wearing like bandages, so when we get to the point where we finally see what's under the bandages, we just see the heads are like hollowed out, but they're still just wandering around in like drooling black ooze or whatever. And we don't quite know what they are or what's going on, really, even after we get to the reveal of what appears to be a giant stork. And this is something that could have, because with Rama I did kind of criticize that in the storm drain segment a little bit, about how it was kind of predictable and we knew what we were getting. But here it does feel like there's more of a there's more of a mysterious build up. So when we actually see what it is, there's much more of like a what the fuck quality to it. When we see this giant stork monster thing that's feeding a mutant baby with brains that it's regurgitating, and it's the kind of craziness that you would ask for and hope that they were building up to, because there is a lot of build up. And I actually love the ending of this one when they shoot the stork and then stomp on its head and crush it when you think it's getting ready to sit up again. And it's going to leave on like that cliffhanger note, because so many of these end with the idea of like evil winning. So it's actually kind of a satisfying subversion that they actually kill the monster and it actually comes to a conclusion. And the darkly funny picture, just to end that, of them posing with its corpse. Sadistic, but also satisfying. Like I said, you're used to the monster winning in these segments. And it's also just a nice uptick in energy, I think, after, because when we start with the wraparound kind of starts very, very downplayed. And so you also kind of want to start off with a bang also. And so this is like kind of a great way to start that, with having the wraparound be super downplayed, and then this one's like all frenetic energy. Like we're basically kicking into gear with this one. So I really dig this one. The next segment is Dream Girl, and you want to talk about how a lot of these segments in the VHS movies end up with the main characters in really bad positions, or having bad things happen to them, or they get some sort of big comeuppance or something. It's like, who is one of the least possible types of people that could get sympathy out of us? And so the main characters of Dream Girl are paparazzi. So all of that checks out, and we can't wait to see what happens to them. What terrible, horrible things. So, and the reveal especially that the main one is like a failed actor who's just bitter at the quick rise to fame of the actress that they have to follow around. And so, not a whole lot of interest happens until the main character is finally kind of stalking this actress around a film set, and eventually ends up in her trailer and behind the closet and is watching her. And this sort of voyeuristic quality is something that works well in horror, because like there's already the sneaking in is something that all the sneaking around is something you're not supposed to be doing, and then the spying on top of that, and it's like there's already like a heightened tension of doing this forbidden thing even without horror. And then when you add in the fact that you're anticipating something potentially monstrous is going to happen, adding that layer to it really heightens it in a particular way. But then this is when he turns and he sees her face in a bowl, or one of her faces in a bowl, and it's startling as it is, but there's something that I'll never understand. A choice that some of these found footage directors make is having a loud music cue. And it's like, we already talked about this in previous movies in the VHS series, is there's something very specific about why found footage works, and it's like being in the moment and feeling like you're there, and everything feeling authentic is where the horror really comes from. So when you throw in these loud music cues that are often criticized in regular movies for just being something that can take you out of the mood or feel like it's really cheap, because they're trying too hard to force a scare out of you when what you're looking at is scary enough. And in this particular case, especially, with being a found footage setup, and what we're seeing is already startling. I have no idea why that music cue's in there, and it drives me crazy. But it just, like, it defeats the whole purpose of the found footage. But it is what ultimately gets him caught and leads us to the big turning point in this story, where they basically try to go as big as they possibly can when it's revealed that she's, like, this murderous robot who wants to take over his skin and rule as a commoner, is what she says. And the chaos and the carnage escalate. There's melting faces, there's hearts being ripped out, there's the music and like the strobe effect, and just this mass killing spree. And it's a lot of noise and a lot of flash, but the segment still manages to be kind of unmemorable. And also, I think that comes from just kind of being pretty basic in concept. I guess there's something in here about stardom and the toxicity around it and stuff like that, but this one's always just kind of been a bit forgettable to me, which is really funny. I mean, it's not bad, it's fine, but what's really funny is that we've been down so many crazy paths, whether it be this series or any horror movie in general, that when this segment ends with an insane robot ripping off someone's face and then wearing it over their own, and the response is, it's fine, I guess. It's like that. I think that really says something about how far we've come with horror and how much we've seen. And like, not even just in horror in general, but like just in this series. So God bless this series for being that insane that what happens in this story feels sort of basic. So this next one is called Live and Let Dive, and it's by Justin Martinez, who is a part of Radio Silence, who of course did one of the more memorable segments in the original VHS movie. And as far as the setup of this one, I'm just a sucker in general for a great skydiving sequence. So take into account that, and that we're seeing this through the perspective of somebody who's preparing to skydive, who's afraid of heights. And it's this big birthday celebration, and you've got a bunch of people who are super excited in this very small, very contained plane. And so basically the whole thing could have been set on this plane, and you would still get peak levels of terror between the claustrophobia of it before it even starts, and then the fighter jets going by, and the alien hand when everything just starts getting way out of control. And I love the fact that we do see the giant UFO, and that's like, we've seen that from their perspective, where they're not sure what it is, and then they determine it's a UFO, and just everything feels like it's happening in real time. But it's not even like the UFO that's really causing the major turbulence here, but it's the fighter jets going after it. Just add this whole other, like, everything is going insane, and the terror is rising, and that's where the fear starts, let alone when they're actually out of the plane, and we get this insanely well-made shot where he's falling, and we see him falling downwards, and then he'll turn back up, and we'll see like the wreckage of the plane happening, and then back down to the ground, and just kind of seeing this sort of rolling over and over again. And there's a guy over here that's like lost his leg and is just falling to his death. And it's an insane... The whole sequence is insane, especially when we get to the point where it's getting way too late and his parachute isn't opening, and he's calling to Logan, his best friend who he's strapped to, and just not getting a response, and it just gets more and more heart-pounding the closer they're getting to the ground and the more he's panicking. And you really feel his panic through the screen also, and it's really incredible until he finally just lands really hard, and then we've got like blood dripping down in the shot, and we're not quite sure where it's coming from, and eventually we get the horrific image of Logan having been decapitated at some point when the parachute opened, and the fact that that's like his best friend, and then we've got like all the debris hitting the ground. It's just fucking insane non-stop. And then once we finally settle down and realize where we are, we're in like an orange grove, and then we're basically stuck in a maze at this point, and the aliens are just gliding around and jumping around, and their design is like really freaky, and the more we see them, the more details we see. Like their heads have like that beam that comes out, there's the really thin sharp rods that come out that they can kill you with. They have that, it appears they're in some constant state of crouched, so when the one like stands up and kind of rises, just everything about this is insane and freaky. But I also love the moments where we do stop, like how Logan was his best friend and we have that horrific gory image of him without his head, and then later on when he's looking for his wife and he finds her with like her face peeled off, he actually stops to like cry and rage and like grieve for what's happened, even despite all the chaos of this. And I love how real those moments are, and that those touches of reality only add more to the scary factor of everything that's going on here. And then when he finally finds a truck and the guy thinks he's insane, because obviously he's just jumped in and he's screaming about monsters in the grove and stuff like that. I suppose it's, even from a horror audience, you can say like, oh, why is this idiot not going? Does he not hear him? But it's like, yeah, think about the fact if you see a guy like run out of an orange grove screaming like that and jumping into your truck, you might immediately think that he's insane if you're thinking from a real world perspective. But then while this truck driver's getting attacked, we get a jump scare that actually gets me every single time, which is when we see the guy here where the driver's side door is open, and then he gets attacked over here, and our lead character Zach is looking out the back window of the truck, and then when he turns back, when we're expecting to see the open driver's side door, the alien is like right here in his face. And no matter what, that one gets me every fucking time, and it's annoying, but I love it. And then this ultimately leads to obviously you have the moment when he gets his fingers blown off also, because not enough has happened to this guy apparently on his fucking birthday, no less. But then we get this very intense abduction where he's pulled up in the truck, but we're seeing it from his perspective. And so from there is a very claustrophobic feeling to it, like almost like it's squeezing, and like you can feel that. And the fact that he's inside the truck only adds an extra feeling of just being trapped. And then just this helpless moment of him being up there with them, and that's essentially the end of the segment. And it's just really intense and terrifying and kind of amazing from beginning to end. This next one is called Fur Babies, and it's brought to us by Justin Long and Christian Long. And I don't want to take anything away from Christian, who I believe is his brother, but I do just really quick want to touch on how valuable I think Justin Long is in regards to horror, and how unsung his contributions can go, because I feel like he's one of those people where any time I see his name anywhere near horror, it's probably going to be gold, whether it be Jeepers Creepers or Barbarian or Drag Me to Hell or Tusk. He had the really small part in Weapons. he's just got like an incredible horror scream. Like he's just like one of the ultimate like modern day horror people to me, and I get really excited anytime I see his name on something horror related. So the fact that he's like co-writing and directing a horror segment was just really exciting to me to begin with, and it certainly delivers in its way. So we start off with like this innocent ad for a dog daycare, and we see this woman who's, you know, seems like she's really overly friendly, almost like one of those people that's almost immediately suspicious because of how openly friendly they seem. And it's like the more innocent the whole thing seems, the more insane it's probably going to be. She kind of gives me vibes of the insane wife in Black Klansman. And if you've seen that, you know what I'm talking about. But here, there's like already a layer of creepy in the background when we get into the taxidermy angle. And we see, like, there's the dogs behind her, but then especially there's the one that has like the crazy eyes that actually ends up becoming more of a point later. And kind of being the end payoff of the entire segment. So when we have these animal rights people infiltrate, and we have this hidden camera in this dog carrier, and this is the way we're seeing it. We're kind of seeing it from that voyeuristic way, like we were just talking about with Dream Girl. But here, there is something really tense. Like, this is, before we even get into what the fuck craziness is going on here, there's just so much tension in this scene alone, when they're talking to her and asking questions, and her expressions and personality just kind of keep switching back and forth. There's that moment where she bends down to the dog, and she's like looking directly into the camera for a long time, and she's completely still, and we don't know if she sees the camera or not. So there's multiple times where we get this vibe of we can't tell when she's clocking something's off and when she isn't. And then there's these moments when she talks about the fact that she claims to live alone, and then there's all these clues that she doesn't. There's one moment where we get a point of view from a different camera that she's clearly aware of and she's like signaling to. And then there's the reveal of Bo, her brother, who it's also basically ends up being like her Igor. And the way we see him, and this is another thing that we just talked about, where putting a jump scare into found footage, and how you have to be skillful about the way you do that. And this one does do that. When we first see Bo, he is there, and he's acting very unnaturally. He's just sitting there, and we're not expecting to see somebody there at that moment, so it's already startling. But the noise that they add is a well-timed bark, which makes perfect sense to be in this scene. So that's the way to do it. There's also a jump scare later where it's the sound of a cage rattling when like a hand pops out. And it's like, that's the way you like using noise that's like actually in the environment. If you want to do the jump scare noise, that would be the way to do it. So I'm really glad that this one addressed that. And then we eventually get to the point where we go down into the basement, where we know in any horror story, the craziness is going to kick in when you go down to the basement. So with this one, it does look like a relatively normal basement, and then we just sort of keep going like it's kind of its own maze, and it gets more and more spacious and weird, and we have this area with all these ominous looking tools, and she says like, oh, it's just my arts and crafts area. And then we're revealed these curtains with something back there. We've talked a lot about silhouettes in this series, and this is another very effective use where we see the hybrids behind a curtain. The hybrids being her taking the bones and body parts of her dead dogs and stitching them together and morphing humans into these human-dog hybrids that she then treats as her dogs, that she brainwashes and uses for like protection and pets and all that, and they look really fucking monstrous and disgusting and disturbing, and they crawl around. They're all shapes and sizes, and of course this hybrid human and animal is something that Justin Long knows all too well with his experience in Tusk. And it does make me wonder like how much he might have consulted Kevin Smith when he went into this. I hope he did, at least. But even the way we see them, like how we don't necessarily see them like full on. We see them from kind of distances, or there's those insane shots from underneath when they're like running around and attacking, and it's really fucked up and really sticks with you, and I would expect nothing less from something horror related that has Justin Long's name on it. So, and shout out to Christian as well. This one's certainly a memorable one. So this last one brings us one of our favorite horror collaborations with Mike Flanagan and Kate Siegel, but this time instead of writer and director and actress, it's just writer and director with her directing the segment and him writing it, which is called Stowaway. And this is another one that's good about establishing itself in a sort of reality before we really take off into the abnormal. Where we see this woman who's been in the Mojave Desert and she's become obsessed with finding and documenting some sort of alien life to the point that she's basically ripped her entire life apart, where through her footage we see snippets of like the life she left behind, and we see moments that really humanize her, like when she's talking into the camera and trying to prove her points, and she keeps struggling and having to like redo intros and stuff like that. I've literally been doing that nearly all day with the last couple of videos I've done like this, and that frustration's very palpable when it's coming through. And we have the reality of like these Blair Witch style interviews and these authentic people and locals that are talking about what they have maybe seen. And you have the moment where they even throw it in a bit of a comedic way when she finally sees something and she's pursuing it, and she says like, "Suck it, Steve," and "Suck it, Stanford." And it's like, even though that's funny in the moment, it does show that she like has something to prove, and it shows how much she's pushed away. And she's pushed away so much just to prove that this is real and that this is actually finally happening. And so when she finally gets her wish and she's on the ship, we see her like really excited to like learn and explore what she's seeing and what she's looking at. And this is really fun because, especially in some of the previous segments, it's not the typical emotion that you see when people are suddenly aboard an alien ship. Usually it's fear, and something terrible is usually about to happen to them. And of course something terrible is about to happen to her also, but right now she has no idea of that and just wants to document everything she's seeing and take everything in. And then she makes a discovery of these, what she says looks like dental floss, but whenever they're touched, it's almost like a church bell ringing or something. It's this very otherworldly sound, but also because it's basically like piano wire, it cuts her every time she touches it. And then we have this moment where these nanites come down and cure her and like fix her, and it seems like this positive miracle is happening, and there's just something almost enchanting about it. And like when they're coming down, like how beautifully they descend. And then the terror comes in pretty quickly after that, once we've settled in. And her very real fright when she turns around and realizes that the door is gone. And she has no idea where she's going, but she's trapped on the ship. And then this great way of doing this where everything starts to warp, and there's like this unknown intensity that we can feel just by looking at it, like everything blurs. And it's like that the intensity hits like 100%. And then before we know it, we're looking down at Earth, and we realize the hyperspeed is what's basically warping everything, and it's throwing her around the ship and injuring her, so the nanites keep healing her. And at first when she realizes like, oh, we went through hyperspeed and I got fucked up, but the nanites can fix me, so it's this feeling of like, oh, well, that's good. It's like some kind of relief. But then the realization that the nanites are coming from animals in stasis, and that's what's fixing her. So the more this happens, the more she's sort of morphing with these different animals and these different breeds. And then the launches into hyperspeed keep happening. So every time they do that, she's getting more and more fucked up, and then getting more and more of this animal DNA, and God knows what else. And this becomes maybe one of the more insane takes on body horror that I've seen, and that's a pretty high bar. And when you think about, like, you're not supposed to ask writers, for good reason, where their ideas come from, because it's a whole complicated thing, and it's kind of, sometimes it can be hard to explain, but you're just not supposed to ask the question. But if there's one instance where I would want to ask Mike Flanagan, like, where the fuck did this come from? Where did this idea, like, where did this even come from? This is so amazingly fucked. And it's insane, and it's haunting, and it'll stick with you, and like I said, especially to see the joy of exploration being met with this total insanity, and even at the end, when she's this unrecognizable mass, and there is, a scary factor in it, but it also feels like the exploration's always in her of, so where are we going from here? And it's like, it is this scary realization of this is going to go on forever, but at the same time, it's still like, you're living your dreams, so this one's really insane, and I kind of love it for that. So this wraparound segment is interesting. It's called Abduction, and it's from an actual documentarian, Jay Cheel, who appears as himself, and he receives this footage of what could possibly be an alien encounter. And then we basically just get a series of little documentary-type moments about aliens and the history of their appearances in sci-fi and all that other stuff and other people's encounters. Starting with this whole thing with the Farrington house, where there's this urban legend about seeing a gray form, and we talked before, of course, earlier in the series about how I just love anything with like the urban legend kind of feel. And then you've got this stuff that's older footage, and what's potentially really impressive is some of this, I'm not sure if it was filmed for this and made to look old, or if it's just actually old footage of something. But either way, it's either very well-placed old footage or very, very well-done stuff that's made to look old, so regardless, that's great. And then throwing in the sort of realism of this documentary feel of throwing in this YouTube channel that I'm pretty sure is a real channel, or a couple of real channels, one of which are the guys that watch and judge like visual effects in movies to see like how good or bad they are, and they're watching this footage to see if it's doctored in any way, and which is a really nice realistic detail to throw in. And then we just reach this moment at the end where we've got this footage we've been building up, and the way we get the commentary on it, of them watching it before we actually see it for ourselves, is a really interesting way to go into that. And then finally it does end with us seeing it, and while it's not necessarily like a huge payoff necessarily, that is a wild final shot going down the throat, but what I like about this wraparound is that it doesn't really feel like it's made to set up that it's leading to some giant payoff, like the last one was, right? It was like building up the whole time. Total copy from 85 was like it was really, really building up for us to see the final footage, and then it ended up being underwhelming. And it's like here, I don't even feel like it's the point to get to the footage. It just feels like it's sort of setting the mood between segments, and I just really like that quality to it. So as a wraparound, in that sense, I think it really works. So as far as ranking, this is another one that's a little difficult just because this is another pretty strong lineup. But I think I can safely put Dreamgirl at the bottom, where, like I was saying, to its credit, it has to be a pretty crazy franchise we're talking about when a segment as crazy as Dreamgirl can be seen as sort of mid. So it definitely has some good qualities in it, but overall, and especially in this lineup, I would have to put it at the bottom. The next one up is probably Stork, which is another one where it's much more simple, but I love the idea of it just being this sort of action segment, really more than anything else, and then building up to what is essentially this really insane creature, and just being overall very entertaining and a very great and explosive way to start the movie off. Then third is going to be Fur Babies. Like I said, I can't praise Justin Long horror enough, and the sort of callback to when he did Tusk, and just the very disturbing and memorable nature of just some really, really fucked up shit, and that's always appreciated, especially in horror. So, number 2, I think, is going to be Stowaway. Extremely well made, extremely well directed by Kate Siegel, and of course, Flanagan's really fucked up writing, and like I said, basically peak body horror, and so that's really great. And then at the top, I have to put Live It and Let Dive, which is maybe one of my favorite segments in the whole VHS franchise, and it's just fucking insane and exciting and terrifying all the way through from beginning to end, and I love it. So I think that's going to be it for this one. So we have one left, which is the brand new one, VHS Halloween, which as of filming this I have not seen yet, so I am excited, a little cautious, but mostly excited to get to that. I love the concept of having them all set at Halloween. I feel like that's something that should have happened a long time ago with this franchise, but I'm glad we're getting it now, and I really hope it lives up to that. So until then, I think that's it.